Okay, this is your first trip to the South doing a signing, isn't it?
Oh God, he's starting off with a toughie.
Well, we advertised it as that.
What do we define by South? For example, I was in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago.
It's kind of South.
Okay, that's what I thought. I mean, any place where they all go, you all. You all.
That's good criteria.
Yes, I was in North Carolina. I was doing a signing for Future Imperfect, the two-part series I did with George Pérez, and we went to some stores over there and signed a bunch of books. I think I may have been in Atlanta. I don't remember. I've been in and out of the South, quite a bit. Back when I was sales manager at Marvel, there was a period there where it seemed like I was going to Atlanta every other month. But that's my sales days. But
right.
I haven't done a lot of southern swings, as it were.
Okay. How's the tour gone so far this weekend?
Well, so far so good. I have actually a diary that I was keeping of it, which is in my luggage.
And where might your luggage be?
Dallas. It's enjoying the environs there, and will hopefully be joining us sometime later today. The response that I got at the store yesterday was absolutely phenomenal. I've never gotten a turnout like that. 10 people showed up. It was no. I had estimates are over 300 people.
350 would be absolute minimum.
That would be over 300. Over 355 people showed up at the store yesterday. There was the line kind of like wound around, and that was kind of a bizarre feeling for me. So that was really nice. And the stores before that, the Hero stores also, got very, very good turnout. It was very, very gratifying, very pleasing to see.
That's great. I've always heard you had a pat answer to your fans that asked you why you don't write scripts for Star Trek The Next Generation, and you always tell them that you wrote one and they rejected it, so you turned it into a novel. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I did a script for them that I did, purely on spec, and they didn't want it, which was fine because they get in hundreds and hundreds of scripts. So, fortunately enough, I was in the enviable position of being able to take the script and do something with it aside from use it for scrap paper.
Right.
I turned it into a book called Rock and a Hard Place. I took a number of the elements from the script and incorporated it. The final book really bears almost no resemblance to the script that I originally submitted. It was more along the lines of the starting point for the book. In terms of why I haven't written for the show thus far, basically they haven't really hadn't hired me to do anything yet. That may change sometime. I don't know for sure. They're going into the 7th season. They've got Deep Space Nine on the blocks, so that's up and running. The demand for manpower may be increasing substantially, so it is not impossible that they may scrape the bottom of the barrel and actually start getting novelists to write for them. Although the thing that I have resolved is that in the event that I do sell something to them and I do write a story for them or whatever, I'm not going to tell anybody about it until like the week before it airs. Once I see it listed in TV Guide, then I'll be sure that it's going to happen. Before that, I don't want to say anything.
Don't want to jinx anything. Huh?
Well, yeah, well, not even just a matter of jinxing. It's more a matter of making myself look like an idiot, because if I say to people, yes, I've sold a story, and we're going to be going to teleplay, and this, that, and the other thing, and then 6 months later people say, whatever happened to that Star Trek story? And I go, yeah, well, they decided they didn't like the way it was turning out, and so they junked it.
Yeah.
So who needs that grief?
All right, you mentioned Deep Space Nine. I'm curious, what's your opinion of the show so far?
I'm very impressed by it. And I didn't think I would be. The Bible, and the pilot episode didn't seem all that promising, or at least not not executed particularly well. And I thought that the pilot episode was not very good, but the characterization seemed there, and the situation seemed there. And I've been very pleased to see that in subsequent episodes, they seem to be carrying off on it quite well. I found it very, very entertaining. A lot of fans have been complaining about it, and I'm not entirely sure why, because all I can think of is, do these fans remember what the first season of Next Generation was like? I mean, the first season of Next Generation was practically unwatchable. whereas every single episode of Deep Space Nine, except for the pilot, has been quite fun. So I've been enjoying it.
Good. You mentioned that you just finished a Deep Space Nine novel, is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell me anything about that?
Yes, I can.
Do you mind?
Oh, no, I wouldn't mind at all. What essentially happened... Quiet, Tink, not now. I don't care about Hook. What essentially happened was that the editor of the pocketbook line wanted to put out a Deep Space Nine novel because the television show had gotten off to a very strong start, and they wanted to try and take advantage of it as quickly as possible. They'd already come out with the novel tie-in, The Emissary, and they were planning to do Deep Space Nine novels later on in the year, but because the show was starting off strong, they wanted to strike while the iron is hot. And they came to me and they said, please, 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 we'll pay you a ton of money, please, 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 please. And I said, like, you know, let's go back to the ton of money part. And the thing was that if I thought this show was a major snorer, I would not have bothered. Indeed, the thing is that they had been talking to me about a Deep Space Nine novel several months before the show aired. And the stuff that I read the Bible and I read the pilot script, and I was so underwhelmed by it that I said, I really was not all that interested in getting involved with it. I wasn't brushing it off, but I wasn't that interested in getting involved with it. But by the time they spoke to me again in January about it, I had read, I'd seen a second episode of it, and I'd read the scripts for the first 5, and I said, well, this show is going places I really like. So then I started to get enthusiastic about it. So then they came to me with this whole thing about doing a novel and getting it out there, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll go for that. And I'm really quite pleased with what I came up with. It's called The Siege, S-I-E-G-E, and what essentially happens in a nutshell is that another shapeshifter, who may or may not be of the same race as Odo, shows up on Deep Space Nine and goes on a killing spree. And Odo and the other members of the Deep Space Nine crew have to obviously stop him. It's a little bit, it's got a bit of a flavor of the original thing, the original story of who goes there, and that you've got the shapeshifter walking about and menacing people within a confined area, which is always fun. But by the same token, you've got the additional layer in that who goes there was simply paranoia. In The Siege, you've got Odo really in this kind of difficult situation because this may be one of his own people, and he's trying to deal with it on that basis as well. So you've got all these additional layers to it. It's also fun to be able to write sequences with like shape-shifting characters battling it out with each other, and I don't have to worry about the budget. I don't have to. If I say Odo turns his right arm into a giant mallet, I don't have to worry about how we're going to pull that off visually. I just say, Odo turns his right arm into a giant mallet, and lo and behold, there it is. I basically say to people that the television show has a budget of about $2 million, but the book had a budget of $200 million.
Very convenient.
And yeah, wonderfully convenient.
Do you have a favorite Deep Space Nine character? Is it Odo? Is that why you did?
Well, I like Odo because of the possibilities. I mean, the thing is that I was talking to a friend of mine, Kurt Busick, and he really pointed out something fairly interesting in that essentially you've got a Western here. Now, in any given Western, generally the most interesting character in the Western is the sheriff. Who's the sheriff on Deep Space Nine?
Right.
It's Odo. Who's Cisco? He's the mayor. Wow, you saw John Wayne play a real lot of mayors in his time, right? It's like... So so he's kind of dicey there. Odo was a lot of fun. Quark, once I started writing the book, Quark threatened to take over the manuscript because he started saying all kinds of stuff, and suddenly I'm going, God, I got to rein Quark in here because he's really threatening to walk off with the book. So Quark was a lot of fun. Odo was a lot of fun.
Quark and his friend became like Bill and Ted.
Yeah, really. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, there's several subplots in the book. that, for example, one is involving Dr. Bashir and a child that he wants to treat who would otherwise die, but the parents are of a culture where that is not permissible. And another one is that Quark teams up with another Ferengi named Glav, whose intention is to try and buy Deep Space Nine and turn it into a serious profit-making machine.
Right.
So there's all this stuff going on in the novel. It was really fun. Mike Okuda at the Star Trek offices was tremendously cooperative.
He's their technical advisor, right?
Mike is their technical advisor and their Lord High Poobah and that sort of thing. And he was just starting to get used to it. I even stopped identifying myself in the calls. It's like, he'd pick up the phone, art department, Mike. Yeah, hi, can Odo sprout wings and fly? Yeah, Peter, I guess he could. Okay, thanks, Mike. Odo sprouted wings and flew, There you go. It's nice to involve Mike in it because it's a good defense mechanism. Because if the fans walk along and say, like, well, gee, we've never seen Odo sprout wings and fly, how come he can in the book? I don't have to sit there and explain, because we don't have budgetary considerations. I can just say, well, Mike Okuda said he could, and people go, oh, all right, Mike Okuda, we're not worthy,
Similar to the comic sequence with the photon torpedo being transported around.
Yes, that was dicey. I didn't know we could do that. I mean, when I came up with that maneuver and we ran it past Paramount and everyone's going, I guess so. I mean, the photon torpedoes have physical substance. We've seen it. We've seen the casings. So if they're physical things, technically, the transporter should be able to do it. That and all the stuff I put in Vendetta, I also ran past Mike,
right.
So that everything was technically...
The warp speed.
Yeah, that everything was technically right on top.
Okay. Do you have any idea when we can expect Siege to hit the market?
Yeah, it's a May publication date, which actually means it'll be out in April.
Oh, great.
Which actually means books will probably exist by the third week of March. So it should be real soon.
I look forward to it. Have you been contacted by the Malibu people for their Deep Space Nine comic? Anything about that?
I was the first person they contacted.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they contacted me about it. But at the time, remember, it was the time when I only had the Bible and I had the Bible and I had the pilot episode. I was familiar with it, familiar enough to say to myself, I don't really want to get involved in this project. Right. So I said to the folks at Malibu, this is not going to be my cup of tea, so I'm really not interested in it. And I said to them, you know who you should get? You should get Mike Barr. So I was real thrilled when they wound up getting Mike Barr to do it. Since then, my opinion, as I said, of Deep Space Nine has changed to the point where I now felt comfortable about getting involved in doing the book.
Okay. You mentioned...
But I'm not looking for the comic book, so Mike, it's cool.
You mentioned the Star Trek Bible. Is there a Bible for the Marvel Universe of the year 2099?
Yes.
Did you help with that one?
Oh, yeah. Before any of the books came out, we got together. Myself, Joey Cavalieri, who's the editor, all the writers on the books, got together for like a 2-day seminar in New York at a hotel, in which we hammered out the basics of Marvel Universe 2099. It was interesting because when we got there, they said we thought we was going to be Marvel 2093, and we all get there and we discovered that it has been designated that they've decided to make it 2199. And all of the writers get together and we say, do you like that, 2099? No. 2199? No, I don't like it. It's too far in the future. It's like we're getting towards Star Trek here.
Right.
Do you want to do it? No, I don't want to do it. And so we all sat there and we said, we don't like it being 2199. And Marvel said, like, well, how about 2099? And we went, okay. So I like to refer to it as Marvel 2099 marked down from 2199. So yes, and we came up with a Bible that gave the whole backstory. The backstories on Alchemax, on all of the other companies, the environment that they live in, the setup, all that kind of thing. We are going to be getting together the first week of March, pretty much close to a year after we got together the first time, to discuss doing a big crossover thing. Now that we've launched it, probably around December of this year, we will do a storyline that ties all the books together. We are not going to have it be 12 issues long, covering 3 months, God willing, not in any kind of bags or any other cheesy things. I hope. So watch it come out in bags. Multiple covers with holograms. At any rate, so that'll be coming out late in December. But yeah, we worked in tandem, and Joey Cavalieri works hard to coordinate all of it so that it's consistent.
Right. Okay, so this Miguel O'Hara new Spider-Man wasn't handed to you. That was something that you all created from the ground up.
Well, what was handed to me was, when it was first starting up, they handed me a basic overview of 2099, in which it said, 2099, the world of the future in which corporations are running it. Mm-hmm. Alchemax is the biggest corporation. There's a guy who works for Alchemax who, through an experiment that goes awry, becomes Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. That was it, right? And indeed, most of the stuff that was in the Bible, in that initial proposal, mm-hmm. wound up getting changed completely once we all got together and started hammering things out.
Right.
But that was pretty much all it said about Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Everything from the character's name to the way that his powers worked to the supporting cast, all of that came from me.
To where he got his costume.
To where he got his costume, to the symbol. I mean, I was the one who came up with the idea of having a skull symbol with spider legs coming out of it.
Right.
I thought that would be fairly cool looking.
It is. I like it.
Yeah, looks good on a shirt, doesn't it?
Yeah, we'll get a shot of that later. How did you become involved with the UNICEF project, the Trial of Venom?
They asked me.
UNICEF or Marvel?
Yeah, Marvel.
Marvel.
It was being put together by a fellow named Barry Kaplan, in tandem with an editor, Glenn Howman. No, Glenn Herdling. I'm sorry, Glenn Howman is another friend of mine. They contacted me. You see, what happened was I had worked with them before on other specialty projects. I'd done a Captain America drug abuse book. I had worked on a thing that's going to be for World Wildlife Federation, and I was who they thought of when they said, like, we want to put together this UNICEF project. And they sat down with me, and the thing was that they said, this is going to be a book. We'd like you to write this story. We'd like to call it The Trial of Venom. Originally, that's not what they wanted to do at first. Originally, they wanted to do a Spider-Man meets Spider-Man. They wanted to do a Spider-Man present day and Spider-Man 2099 story together. That was nixed. Mm-hmm. And so instead they said, well, let's do something with Venom. I believe that they were the ones who came up with, we're going to do The Trial of Venom. They had no idea what the story was about.
Just a cool title.
They thought the title sounded catchy.
Right.
And they told me that it was supposed to be a story that was simply a story. It wasn't supposed to be promoting UNICEF, or it wasn't supposed to read like a custom comic. Right. It was to be a story that was, you read it from beginning to end, wow, that was a good story. That's it. It was not preachy or anything. And I said, yeah, sure, okay. Because, this kind of charitable organization thing, it just sounds something I'd really want to get involved with. I mean, when I was a kid, I would go around on Halloween with the little UNICEF box and collect them. I still remember what UNICEF stood for. So it was something that I want to get involved with.
Right. Do you have any idea how successful that is?
Oh, it's tremendously
How much they may have raised?
I think it was somewhere like around $400,000.
Really?
Or $40,000.
Some zeros. Huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it was around 400. I think it was between $400,000 and $500,000 that they raised for UNICEF. What?
What we read about in England.
Oh God! Now the thing is that in England, the book is not available, and some copies have managed to float over there, and it increased in value by something like 900% in the course of 10 days. The book is going like from anywhere from 60 to 90 pounds.
Wow.
So it's apparently it set some sort of record. We beat Spawn's record in terms of the alacrity with which it gained value, which I find kind of amusing. I really wish that they'd made it available in England. I assume that there were reasons that they couldn't.
Right. Going on to the Hulk Future Imperfect, what was it like working with George Perez?
Oh, it was great. What happened with that was that I had this project that I developed a couple of years back, several years back, for this Italian artist. And then he just kind of like evaporated into the ozone. I have no idea what happened to him. And then, but the project was still there, and I had written the plot for the first issue. And Sam Keith was then going to do it, but then Sam dropped out, basically because he realized how long the time it was going to take, and he just didn't really have the time to devote to something of that length.
Right. It's a very elaborate book.
It's very, very elaborate. And what happened was that George literally called me out of the blue and said, you know, Peter, I just want to say I really love your stuff, and because I'd known George for a few years, and he said, I'd really love to work with you on something at some point. And I said, well, you know, what do you think about this project? And I described it to him in about 5 minutes, and George said, that sounds great. So I said, so you're on? He says, yeah, okay, I'm in. And I called Bobby Chase, and I said, guess what? I've finally got an artist for Future Imperfect. Ready? George Perez. And Bobby goes, oh, great. And I said, I'll have George call you. And George called her, or she called George, or whatever. And within 10 minutes after I'd spoken to George, the whole thing was set up. Because George had spoken to me, and we had the whole thing. And Bobby went out, and she ran into Tom DeFalco, and she says, guess what? We have an artist for Future Imperfect, George Perez. And Tom said, good work, Bobby. But, you know, I'm thrilled. I mean, you know, the bottom line is it got done. And Bobby was fast enough off the mark. I mean, George had barely hung up with me, I think, before she got him on the phone and said, like, okay, fine, let's get this thing nailed down.
Right. I remember, isn't there...
Oh, and we're going to be George and I are going to be working on another project for Epic Comics called Saxon Violence. But because we work so well together on Future Imperfect,
right,
that it worked out beautifully that we were now able to do another project together. Because it's very simple. I have a real respect for the artist, and George has a real respect for the writer, you know, for those elements. And when you have people working together who have real respect for what each other does, then you can turn out something that's going to ideally be better than either of them could have produced singly. I mean, that's the whole concept of teamwork. Right.
You have a screenplay for Howling Mad still floating around?
Oh, it's terrible.
Terrible?
I have a screenplay that I wrote in which the people who optioned it, they optioned the book, ostensibly because they liked the book enough to want to make a movie out of it. And they said to me, okay, here's what we want you to do. We've come up with our own story. Take that you know, we've taken it and like rewritten it completely and come up with our own story, and we want you to write the screenplay of this story. This is what this is what the associate producer, the middle management producer with whom I was working, came to me with.
Right.
And I said, okay, you guys are the movie makers, I'm not. I'll take your word for it. And I wrote a screenplay based on that story. They then took it to their boss, the woman the woman and man who had optioned it, and they hated it. Why? They said it showed none of the imagination or verve of the book. Okay. So they came back to me and they said, well, we want you to start over again. I said, start over. I said, do I use that original story that you guys came up with? And the middle management producer says, no, don't use that story. Come up with something completely different. I said, should I use the book? He said, no. I said, so you want me to tell this story, not using the book, and not having any of the story that you came up with? And he said, that's right. I said, let me think about this. And I come back 3 weeks later, in which I tell a story that has the same fundamental premise, namely, you know, about a wolf being bitten and turning into a human.
Right.
But it's completely different. And I send the premise into them.
Right.
This is not a full script at this point. This is a premise. And they call me back, and the guy says, well, what the hell is this? And I said, what do you mean? He said, but this is no good. This is nothing like the book. And I said, I quit. Goodbye. You're on your own. And I hung up because I'd done everything that I was contracted to do and more.
Makes no sense.
He called me up a week later and said, we'd like you to do another proposal. He said, so where's the next proposal? And I said, what part of I quit don't you understand? I mean, this seems fairly succinct to me. And then after that, they didn't call me, and then the option rights expired, and then he got fired, and they're slowly dissolving into the ozone, and this is good. So, and that script, which I hope never sees the light of day, is theirs, and they can't do anything with it because they don't own the option rights anymore. I do.
Right.
So it will never see the light of day. The book may still get made into a movie someday. I mean, who knows? Mm-hmm. But it won't be that script.
Hopefully by someone that actually likes the book and wants to use the original story.
That'd be nice. I have finally written scripts that are getting made. I wrote a two-parter for Full Moon Entertainment. They make a series, among other things, they make a series of movies called Trancers, starring Tim Thomerson as a detective from the future.
Right.
And I've written the scripts for Trancers 4 and 5. This is for the video market, basically. Mm-hmm. It's essentially the video equivalent of comic books. And I wrote these, and they're going to be filming in Romania in late April, and it's going to be lots of fun. So finally I've written something that gets made, and I've broken the curse, I hope.
Right. See how well it turns out.
Yeah.
I think it was Phil Foglio that said what you do is you take your money, then you don't cross the little red line, you just throw your script over the line, and you have nothing else to do with it.
Thus far, they've been really, really, supportive and respectful of the scripts that I wrote, and they're very pleased with it.
We would like to do something. We have a question we'd like to ask all of the guests that we anticipate having, so that later we can do a show where we put that together, and it would like it to be on censorship. Do you have a statement or comment or anything you have to say about censorship?
Censorship is bad. I mean,
good.
What else am I supposed to say?
Yeah. Feel free to digress at this point.
Fortunately, I know that you guys don't believe in censorship, so I know that I could say and other things like that, and you wouldn't bleep out if I said, for example. So, we don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
I mean, censorship is bad. What in God's name is there to elaborate? I feel like what's his name? What was his name? That other vice presidential candidate who said I'm out of ammo. I mean, if you want to ask me a specific question about it.
Have you had any personal experience with where you've been censored and what did
where I've experienced what is actually censorship? No, censorship is something very specific. I've had instances where I wanted to tell a story and I was not able to tell it the way that I wanted to, where I've had things cut out and where I've had stories virtually disemboweled. That's not censorship. That's editing.
Right.
There's a fine line.
It's like on throwing apples almost.
Yeah. Even so, I mean, the thing about censorship is that it's something very, very specific and should not be forgotten about. Right. That is that publishers can publish whatever they want. Movie makers can make whatever they want. And if they don't want to make something and they order it changed, that's not censorship. They are entitled to do that.
Right.
Censorship is an outside agency trying to impress their requirements and their restrictions on people and forcing them to toe the line. That is censorship. I haven't really had that happen to me directly. Doesn't mean it won't.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that it won't. It doesn't mean that it's something that must not be guarded against zealously. It is a very frightening thought that we live in a country where so many people have a fundamental misconception of what the First Amendment is. Because I've had people say to me yeah, well, I support the First Amendment, but not when it's something that really upsets me. And it's that's what the First Amendment is for. The First Amendment doesn't support the right of people to say things and do things that we all agree with. It's to say things that we don't agree with, but they have that right to say it, and they must be allowed to express it. Mm-hmm. If you have anything specifically, I'd be happy to talk about on that basis.
Oh no, we're just curious about any message you might have, or any experiences you might have, or incidents you might have incurred.
Say no to censorship.
Say no to censorship. Good plan.
Say no to censorship. But no, as I said, the experiences that I've had in terms of seeing some of my stories get real screwed up, real bad, there is such a thing as economic pressure, which is a kind of censorship. For example, in a very indirect way, I had something censored. When Alpha Flight 106 came out, and it was the North Star announces that he's gay thing.
Right.
Hit CNN and NBC and ABC, which must have been a really slow news day. I mean, I'm sorry, a fictional character announces he's gay. This is not news.
Right.
Okay? I mean, he's pretend, okay? He could also very well announce that he's the ruler of the planet Zephron. I mean, it's fiction, okay? Let's get a grip. But nevertheless, it made all the news and everything like that. And a large national distributor of toys, a chain, among other things, said to Marvel Comics, they started to exercise economic censorship. They went to Marvel and they said, and they threatened to discontinue carrying all the mutant toys, the entire X-Men line plus everything upcoming, because they didn't want to be associated with having anything that has this mutant toy line related, because a mutant had been revealed to be gay in Alpha Flight. Right. There was no Alpha Flight action set. There was no North Star toy.
Right.
But they wanted to stop carrying Cyclops and Wolverine and many other famous gay characters because of this revelation, which immediately caused a chilling effect at Marvel. And what Marvel immediately did was they ran down, they said, have we got any other stories that could potentially cause any other controversy? Because if we do, gut it. Don't let it be controversial.
Right.
Marvel only had one story in the hopper, a 2-part X Factor story that was about abortion.
Right.
Which I had written so carefully that it didn't matter how you felt. If you were anti-abortion or pro-abortion, it didn't matter. You came across from that story feeling that you had had your viewpoint upheld.
Right.
And which was a real tightrope walk. I mean, I've never written a story so judiciously, and I really pulled it off. And this is not just me saying so, Tom DeFalco said so.
Right.
But that story got gutted because of the economic pressure that was put on Marvel by this national chain. So in a way, it's censorship, because in a way it's not, because again, it goes back to that Marvel can publish or not publish whatever they want. But if they had been left on their own devices, the story would have seen print as it was, because they were nervous about it. But Tom had read it, and he said he had no problems with it, that it had been written fairly and presented things, and as far as he was concerned, it was going through. And it was originally going through that way, and it had been dialogued and penciled and everything, and then word came down from on high. And they didn't know about it, but they knew that they were getting all this flack because of Alpha Flight. So that pretty much cut it, and that gutted that story, which was a shame, because in its final form, the story made almost no sense.
Right.
Which is what's going to happen.
Right. Did you have any problem with dealing with AIDS and the Incredible Hulk?
No, I had no problem, because I played it very carefully. Nowhere in that story, if you read that AIDS story, nowhere does the word homosexual appear.
That's true.
There was a reason for that. It's so that I didn't have a 70-year-old kid going to his mom going, Mom, what's a homosexual? Where did you read about that? Here, Mom, in this issue of the Hulk. Dear Marvel Comics, how dare you?
Right.
Right? I avoided that. I had characters in there who were clearly gay if you were old enough to realize it.
Right.
If you were not old enough to realize it, it went... It didn't destroy your enjoyment of the story, but it went...
Right.
And that story came out. It didn't make CNN, didn't make ABC, NBC, got no media attention at all, with the single exception of a write-up in the Village Voice, which was glowing. They loved it. And that was it, and that suited me fine. Because my feeling was, as soon as I start using words that can be grabbed by CNN, I'm going to get in trouble.
But you got a lot of mail on it,
Yes.
and you still do.
I got more mail on that issue of Hulk than I've gotten on any other issue.
Positive.
And it was all positive,
All of it?
except for one letter. One guy wrote in and basically said, how dare we show perverts to be sympathetic, quote unquote. And we ran that letter in the letters page and said, like, boy, you got problems. At any rate, so, that was, I because I handled it judiciously, we didn't have any problems, because I knew what would happen. I knew what would happen if we did something really overt. And sure enough, we did that issue of Alpha Flight, and North Star comes leaping forward going, I am gay. And sure enough, there it is on CNN, that panel reproduced all over the place. And who was the one who then got stuck with the backlash?
Right.
So there it goes.
Right. I think a large part of our audience that we intend to have would associate the Hulk with Lou Ferrigno and the old Hulk Smash comic.
Oh, sure. I have people come up to me and not come up to me, but if I tell people that I write the Hulk, is the red light flashing an indicator of anything?
Yep, almost at that.
You grab another one real quick.
Copy.
I just want to finish this one thing.
Okay, let's finish this one question and then we'll start.
Okay, well, just can you describe the new Hulk for a new audience?
Well, I was going to do the thing is that I've had so many people say to me, will you write the Hulk? No, the Hulk died. I saw that in a movie. He fell off of a helicopter and he died. And I try to explain to these people that the Hulk could fall from orbit and get up and go like, okay? So don't give me this helicopter garbage. The new Hulk, the current Hulk, is essentially the combination of all the previous incarnations of the Hulk. He's got the brains of Bruce Banner, the nastiness and attitude of the Gray Hulk, and the sheer physical presence and power of the Green Hulk. He's all the best elements, welded together.
Just like you.
So that's the Hulk in a nutshell. So for those people who say like, oh yeah, the Hulk, he's big, he's dumb, he's stupid, it's like, no. You might, want to try picking up the book.
Right. Hopefully they will.
Hopefully.
Here you have a line of Star Trek novels coming out for younger readers. Can you tell us about those?
Yes, I can.
Will you please?
Sure. Why, sure. It's basically a line of YA books for Star Trek books for younger readers. It's going to be focusing on Worf's days at the Academy, covering his first year or two. Those tumultuous times. It will also be featuring guest appearances by people. It will like his first meeting with Kalar. So I'm trying to write something that I think will be of interest to both younger and older readers. And it will be very exciting, and it's tied in with Star Trek continuity, and you'll laugh and you'll cry. Oh, yes. It's also illustrated. It's going to be illustrated by James Fry, with whom I worked on the Star Trek comic book, and also the DC Blasters comic.
He wants to know if he can get you to put 2 JL on there.
To JL? Sure. You're going straight to JL. Do not pass go. Okay. Anything else?
Here you're a big fan of the Comics Code Authority.
Well, it ties into what we were talking about in terms of censorship earlier. The Comics Code was essentially something that was created by the comic book publishers as a means of self-censorship. And the Comics Code has a bunch of rules that editors and writers are supposed to follow. And if you don't follow them, then it would not have the Comics Code seal of approval. And to a very large extent, I consider that to be, even though it's something that's subscribed to voluntarily, that comes very, very dangerously close to genuine censorship. And I think that the Comics Code is something that its time has definitely passed, if ever there was a time for it in the first place. So I really wish that it would go away, because I really don't think it's providing any kind of protection whatsoever. The Comics Code credo is that they are trying to support genuine American values. Well, what would those be? It's just a touch too broad-based for, I mean, genuine American values in New York, in Chicago, in New Orleans, in Paducah. I mean, what are we talking about? It's really just, you know, organized censorship, and it would not bother me in the least if the Comics Code evaporated, and I think that it would be just kind of a blip on the comic book scene if they disappeared.
Very good.
Okay.
Are you going to ask him about the young marzipan earlier?
About young marzipan?
No, he wanted to talk to
The
you
one guy
about.
that was showing you the art earlier.
Yeah, what about
They
him?
interviewed
How often do
him
you get something like that?
separately.
Pretty much every signing you go to, or?
Well, it's hardly any kind of a formula like it lists. 1 in every 32 people comes through. But yes, oh no, there's generally at least one person per appearance of any great size. I mean, if I go to one of these appearances and 10 people show up, then the odds are slim. But
Have you ever seen anybody
there's
that
been-
was actually good enough to go on right away? Or at least
there was one guy that I thought did a really nice. He did a really nice Wolverine drawing. He was in Las Vegas, but he did some actual storytelling pages that needed some work. That was a while back. I have no idea whether he got anywhere. Have I ever seen anyone who I took one look at his work and said, "Oh my God, we have to get you started working immediately"? No, that really hasn't happened yet.
It's happened to other people, though.
What? Yeah, are you talking about for me or for me personally? For me personally, no, that hasn't happened. But there have been occasions where people brought stuff up cold to editors at conventions or store signings and that kind of thing, and the editors saw the talent that was there and like immediately put them to work. So yes, that's certainly happened. Just not, it hasn't happened with me yet. Okay?
Ta-da!
Okay.
We really appreciate your help.
No trouble.
So, Corey, what's it like managing a store?
Living hell.
Are all these people store people, or?
This,
Oh no, I just wasn't sure whether the customers are store people.
it doesn't make no difference to me. So where are you taking it?
C-O-R-E-Y.
And Amy.
Or C-O-R-E-Y and Amy?
When you get divorced, the love possession of the book.
Half. You cut it in half.
Who gets the half of the
put Amy on the back cover.
Hey,
I resemble that remarkably.
Thanks.
When did this happen?
February 1st, 1993. Hey, John.
Yeah, I have a line like that in the X
How's it
Factor
going?
annual. I have Val Cooper saying to X
Not
Factor, "You people are getting lazy," and Jamie Madrox says, "I resent that remark."
really?
And she says, "What, do you deny it?" He says, "No, I just resent it."
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi there. We having fun or what?
You had one? Wow. Oh.
He assumed that the word boss was bad.
He had one.
Huh? You filming?
Well, you did say he had one, didn't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
What?
You did.
Oh my God.
My boss, he had.
These
where's my
are
hook?
starter.
I'm here.
No, we don't encourage.
I can sell. Get your video of you having your book signed by Peter James.
These are sold.
Only $10 per dub.
It's the Flying Elvis's Utah chapter.
Here, I caught that
It's only been stepped on by 3 kids.
The Deep South, where it is almost impossible to rent a U-Haul.
Hi, I'd like you all. Well, we like you all too. Look who we're doing.
If you can sell them. 62 for that.
Was I supposed to write 2 spots?
Spot on the third.
What about Dinky? Dinky didn't get a mention in there?
Okay, Spot and Dinky.
Spot and Dinky? Are these your dogs?
That's him and his wife.
Dinky, you get that on tape? Dinky is your wife? So you're Spot?
I'm Spot.
Well, that's good.
Hosting a show.
Because I was
Spot and
worried
Dinky
it
show.
was the other way around.
Yeah, everyone wants you to think you're Dinky. He got it over there.
11.
Oh, okay.
What's the name of that place in Baton Rouge?
So what's the name of the man on
How do
second?
you spell it?
MULATES.
Two T's.
When somebody get Ross's Rocketeer novel?
You got it.
I think we're going
That's
there
right.
in New
Appreciate it.
Orleans.
Appreciate the interview for the show.
No trouble. Hi there.
Oh, yeah.
How you doing? Your name
And
is
they're
not Spot or
complimentary,
Dinky,
so,
is it?
you know, you can just
Good.
throw them down.
You are? Thank you.
There's another, I mean, you're talking about just, good, thing that's not you, that's really small.
We should have that.
Yeah.
We should have that fabric marker bronze. It was used by Peter David and Dave Sim.
Figure we could probably use this. What was that?
No, we should have the fabric marker bronze. It was used by Peter David and Dave Sim.
You got 11 here, John.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
You'll have to get back online. What was for who?
No, that's not counting that.
No wonder I couldn't find the rest of those. Hi, John. No wonder I couldn't find the rest of those.
Those are mine. I bought those from Coleman.
I know. I called them looking for.
Oh.
Sorry, if I was you, I'd call DC and ask for a trade paperback.
Yeah.
Can't.
But I only want it if you sign it.
Call every day and say you're somebody else.
God knows that's what I do.
Look at this shot.
Send letters typed on different typewriters.
We'll drop a while on this one today and see on the other.
Nice flash.
There's no truth to the rumors, we're just good friends.
I have the internet in my famous paper heroes book.
It's famous.
Will be.
Oh.
Wait till she's done with it.
Wait till she adds a few fabrications.
Little red lights flashing again, Vic.
I know, almost out of tape.